you for tuning in. The news is horrible today. We're going to be talking about that and the broader issue. This is Saturday, August the 3rd, 2019. And this is Mysterious Forces Live. Thank you for tuning in. The news today, once again, has been troubling. As the information stands right now, there are at least 20 people dead in El Paso, Texas. 24 plus people are injured. And according to the information we have so far, last that I saw, the gunman is a 21-year-old male, whom I will not name. I don't give into that. I don't, in these kinds of circumstances, don't name these guys. They don't deserve it. But it's another tragedy involving a mass shooting and gun violence. And I guess I should frame this up just a little bit. We're really having to reconfigure everything because of the change in the YouTube app. And I had a scheduled guest for tonight, Dr. Irina Scott. And because of this technical difficulty that I'll be able to iron out between now and next Friday, I had to cancel her, but I've rescheduled her for next Saturday. So next Saturday night is Dr. Irina Scott. And as I mentioned last night, this coming Friday is Mo Kelly, who has a show on Saturday and Sunday on KFI 640 AM in Los Angeles. If you don't know what that station is, just look it up. It's the number one talk station in Los Angeles and one of the top talk radio stations in the world, I would say. Surely KFI 640 AM is within the top 5 nationally ranked radio stations in the world, I would say. And I'm not going to go on about that. I see Philip Blair in the chat, and I see the professor. And, you can never tell what kind of audience you're going to get with a title like tonight's show. And doing a show like this is a little bit dicey. I think it takes some thought. And quite honestly, since I knew that I couldn't have a guest today, I had gone through, kind of my Rolodex of ideas looking for a show topic that I could do by myself. But as the news kept progressing from El Paso, all I could really think about was the tragedy down there. And I've talked about gun violence or maybe shootings before on the show. We're coming up on 1 year of the show. Our 1 year anniversary will be August 24th. And I'm going to get into that a little more in depth in tonight's episode. But, you don't want to create a show around an event like this that turns into clickbait. I think that's in really poor taste. And that's certainly not the intention behind this. You don't want to. I also am no fan of people that turn tragedy into entertainment or use tragedy as entertainment. I have a real problem with that. So that kind of exploitation is something that I'm against. I guess the reason I'm talking about this is because I have my own experience with guns, and it's not negative, but just like everyone else, as a citizen of the United States and a person that, I'm 53 years old. I was born in America, and I've watched this transformation just like people who are my age, maybe a little younger, but, unfortunately for the younger generation, the millennials and some of the in-betweens, this is all they've known, these kinds of mass shootings. I can remember a time when this wasn't happening. And I thought a lot about how to do this show, and I thought that doing this show in the spirit of a candlelight vigil would be the most appropriate thing to do. That way, it's not exploitive, it's not clickbaitish, it doesn't focus on the tragedy or the horrible details, but it's to honor everyone that was killed, everyone that was injured, all of the people that were affected by that, their friends, family, community, the first responders, everyone. And something I questioned myself today was I was like, well, you're going to pause, you're going to take note of this event. And I didn't do that during the last mass shooting. And I didn't do it on the one before that. You know, I don't know when the last time was that one of these mass shootings happened in proximity to me having a show. I know I've commented on it within a week of one of these events over the last year, but I don't remember when or which one. And isn't that sad? Isn't that telling that I can't remember which mass shooting it was that I made a passing commentary on? I have a background in psychiatric work. I'm not a doctor, obviously. I'm not a clinician. I am not a therapist, but I've worked very closely with a wide variety of people in a large strata of the mental health field. So I know a bit about mental health. I don't know much about gun violence because, well, one time a neighbor fired a shotgun kind of over my head when he thought I was taking wood out of his side of the woods in Missouri. And I got pissed off. You know, actually, that's not true. A guy, last year, we were on our way to Sedona, and some guy was driving recklessly. And as he passed us, because he had been so reckless, I flipped him off. And he slowed down and he rode right next to us with my partner and our son. And he held up a pistol. And he didn't have it in his hand in a way that you would hold it to shoot it, like ready to fire. But he held it up and held it sideways so that I could see that it was a gun, and he showed me the gun. And when you've got your family in the car and you're going up into the mountains, and driving is more dangerous than it normally is anyway, and someone's flashing a gun next to you, you just, you know, that's one of those what the fuck moments, right? You're like, how have we gone from driving to you're showing me a gun because you don't like it that I didn't get out of your way? And so we'll get into a little bit of that. We're just going to ask questions. I'm not going to, you know, another thing I thought about at first, I thought, oh, I could do this whole rundown of the history of mass shootings in America. That was my first idea. It's like, let's just break this down. And the more I thought about the statistics, when I started looking at them and I saw the information, I realized, you know, some of these items become talking points in the mainstream media, and you hear statistics thrown out. And people who really want to know the details and the statistics can look them up on their own. But ultimately, I thought a conversation that was just full of statistics, dates, events, I just felt like that's kind of dehumanizing. That if you're going to get into the numbers of this or break it down into data points, that you're removing the people. And as I thought about this as the afternoon went on, that's when the idea that this show would be more like a candlelight vigil than me doing any political commentary, trying to make any kind of arguments about gun control for or against, leaving all that out of that and just thinking about the people. And I do have just very briefly some statistics. And I know that there are a couple of links that the professor threw in. But the place where I got my statistics today was the Gun Violence Archive. And their website is gunviolencearchive.org. And it's a research group. and it's nonprofit. And it was founded by Michael Klein and Mark Bryant in 2013. And I pulled just one set of statistics, and that is for this year only. And I started looking at how many, like I saw some videos. It was they were dated 2015, 2016. I found one 2017. Once again, unfortunately, this happens so much. Getting current, up-to-date information in terms of data sets is difficult because this happens on almost a weekly basis, if not a monthly basis. And then some of the statistics were broken down into worldwide events, how many happened worldwide, how many happened in America. And then when you got into gun violence, they started breaking it down about individual gun violence and suicide versus murder and accidents. And once again, I just kind of felt like those data sets started to look kind of dehumanizing. So I thought I would just stick with something real basic. And that's the statistics up to date for this year. And I don't know if their database was updated today. This may be today. We might have to add one and add some numbers for dead and injured. But in 2019, so far, we've had 250 mass shootings. If that doesn't count today, that's 251 mass shootings. It's August. This is the 3rd day of August. This is the 8th month of our 12-month year. We've already had 250 mass shootings. So far this year, this is not just mass shootings. This is all gun deaths. We've had 8,702 gun deaths. Probably not counting today. You'd have to add 20. If you add 20, let's assume that this is not up to date per today. That's 8,722 deaths from guns in America so far. The injuries from guns, once again, not just mass shootings, but all gun injuries, totals 17,265. But with 24 plus injured people today, we have to add 24 to that number. So now we're looking at almost 2,300, 7,000, 17,000, 2,300 injuries from gun violence. Accidents are also part of those statistics. Those deaths and injuries include accidents, the whole strata. This is the most heartbreaking statistic. Kids aged 0 to 11 years. So far, and I'm sure not counting today, and we don't know the breakdown of the victims in El Paso, so we're not going to speculate. But probably before today, 390 kids aged 0 to 11 have died in America this year. Now, the 12-year-olds to 18-year-olds and the, 19 on up, I don't know where you want to draw a line. At 53 years old, I can look at a 25-year-old these days and I'm saying they're a kid. You know what I mean? By my long stretch of experience so far, 25, you're still a kid. So that number, 390, surely is skewed because I would surely treat any teenager as a kid. So those are the only statistics that I looked up. Once again, if you're really interested in the topic, that's gunviolencearchive.org. I want to take a couple of steps back. This is a torturous topic for me. Not only do I not like the violence and the deaths, all of it being senseless, but I somewhere along the line, I talked about this on the show before. I grew up with guns. I fired a pistol with my grandfather standing behind me, reaching around, pointing the pistol, pulling the trigger when I was 3 years old. I remember it. And it was a World War II era German Luger. I don't know how it got into his possession, but He had a lot of guns, but he bought them and sold them. But he had a gun cabinet. He didn't have a lot. He didn't have an arsenal, but he probably had 5, 6, or 7 guns, pistols and long guns, shotguns, everything put in there. So I was taught to hunt young, carry a gun to hunt. I grew up around guns. My grandfather would take me out. He would take me to a dump, and he would throw hubcaps up in the air, and I would shoot them with a shotgun. And we would shoot bottles. When I was about the age of 12, I had a friend whose grandmother had a farm, and they let me have a 10 gauge shotgun to take out to my friend's farm. I went to my grandfather's house. He said, "Don't screw my gun up. You better bring it back. And when you bring it back, you're going to clean it." And I walked on down the street to my friend's house a block away. Then we rode over to the other side of town to his grandmother's farm. We went out there. We just shot at trash and garbage and stuff like that. But I was 12 years old, 13 years old. My friend was a year older than me. So here we were, very early teens. We had shotguns. We had 22 rifles that we would go out with. My grandfather would let me shoot the 22 rifle, but I would have to go buy the ammunition. So I was taught responsible gun ownership. And nowhere in this childhood experience, the only violence associated with it is hunting, which I'm against myself now. So I can't even say that I make an exception for that from where I sit now. But I had a lot of fun with guns. I think that some guns are beautiful. I think they're works of art. I think they're an expression of craftsmanship. But at the same time, they have clearly affected our society. I mean, they were the main tool of genocide of the European settlers that came to this continent and committed genocide against the native peoples. So we have a complicated relationship with guns. And I'm talking from personal experience. Once again, some of my fondest memories are of going out with my grandfather shooting guns. And I know from personal experience that I can own a gun and own it responsibly and never, ever, ever. I mean, not only was I afraid of dropping a gun or getting a scratch on the barrel or putting a dent in the stock and bringing the gun back in any kind of worse shape than it was when I took it. I would have never imagined ever shooting anyone, like expressing some anger through the use of a gun in any way. Like, that is completely foreign to me, that thought, to ever take whatever internal shit you have going on in your head, no matter what bad spot you're in your life, and where you're going to take that anger, that hurt, that pain, whatever the fuck it is, and then turn that loose on the world with a firearm. Like, I cannot personally comprehend that. And being a kid, I would have never thought about that. None of my friends ever would have thought about that. None of us ever did anything wrong with those guns. Put them back. My friends continued to own guns. Some have a very large collection. They collect historical guns. So I know that my good friend back in the Midwest can own 20 guns that are historical weapons. I know for a fact he's got an AR-15. I've seen it. I've held it. I know that my friend is not going to go kill a bunch of people. I know that my friend is a responsible, caring human being and that nothing like that would ever happen. So I carry with me, not to belabor all that, I carry with me this practical experience of having guns. I have handled them responsibly. I have never, ever imagined using one in violence. I know people who have what might be considered a large collection of guns. Some people, I don't know, if they want to exaggerate, might say this guy has an arsenal. It might look like that to a casual observer, and if it's someone who's anti-gun, it might very well look like an arsenal. But I know from growing up with this guy, the guy's a collector. So I have to weigh that practical experience against what I see going on in our society, and not necessarily amongst the citizens only, but I am worried about a militarized police force, both federal, county, local, state. Militarized police forces scare me. I think militarized police forces are un-American. I think in combating, like I can see having a SWAT team. I can see having a special tactical unit for police that show up in the extreme circumstances and do what they have to do with the equipment they have. But we are seeing the average cop looking a lot more like someone who's patrolling Lebanon in 1984 than they look like an officer that's, going to make sure you're safe when your car breaks down side the road. The military gear, kind of sends this message that I'm ready to cap somebody, step out of line. It's intimidating, but I don't want to digress too much on that. But I worry about that kind of gun violence by police, especially towards people of color. Look how many innocent black people have been killed by the police over guns. Some of these black folks have guns legally and have done nothing wrong, but they get shot and killed just for having it on them. We see kids killing kids. We see the kind of shit that happened today in El Paso, the insanity of Las Vegas, Orlando, Columbine, name it. The list is long. The list is long. This is like some kind of mental illness writ large, some kind of cultural sickness. There are lots of statistics that could go along and break all that down. Once again, I don't want to talk about that. When I lived in Orange County, California, knowing that there are 13 million people that live in Southern California, from Los Angeles down through Orange County, down into San Diego County, the San Diego area, there are 13 million people in Southern California. 13 million. If you've ever been there, or if you've ever lived there, or if you've ever gotten stuck in the traffic there, you will find it very, very easy to believe. And I can tell you, from living in the greater Los Angeles area, there are very good reasons to not want people to have guns in urban settings. Having grown up with guns, use guns safely, have a friend as a collector, I know that we don't need a bunch of people carrying guns around Los Angeles or Phoenix or Detroit. It doesn't really make much sense. It's hard to apply the Second Amendment across the board. I can give you lots of good reasons why you don't want people everywhere carrying guns in the city. And as you get further away from the city and it becomes more rural, especially people who have farms, ranches, you get into the Wild West out here, wider open spaces, you start to see you would need a gun. If you live where there's wolves and coyotes and bears, you might need a gun. And it would be smarter to have a gun than not have a gun. So breaking that down, I can totally understand why someone who lives in Montana or out in the high desert here in Arizona or on a farm in Indiana, I totally know why they might need to have a gun. There would be practical uses for that. But the Second Amendment doesn't apply to rural settings, versus cities. It applies everywhere to all people, and that's the way the Constitution of the United States works. So, if you can carry a gun in Montana or here in Arizona where you don't need any kind of permit, you know that you can carry a concealed weapon here in Arizona and you don't need a permit to do that. Anyone can have a gun in their pocket, purse, satchel, backpack. Going around, you can have a gun on you here in Arizona. Is that really necessary, though? Do we have enough willpower to look at our cultural problem and police ourselves? Because I'm in favor of the Second Amendment. And there's really, if we could start from scratch tomorrow and create an America from scratch, brand new country starting tomorrow, we're going to write the Constitution, we're going to establish laws, we're going to start tomorrow. I would not have guns. I would have our country look more like New Zealand or England. Australia, I believe, has harsh restrictions. Japan. I think statistics speak for themselves. If you look at the gun-related violence in those countries versus our country, the numbers are astounding. But we don't have that luxury, and that's not the world we live in. Reality says we have had guns from the very beginning of this country, before this place was a country as the United States. Guns have been here from the very beginning. We've had the Second Amendment, and now there are enough guns in America for every man, woman, and child. Plus, literally, there are over 237 million guns in America right now. 237 million. Some of them are like my buddy back in the Midwest that might have 20 guns that he's collected. Some of them inherited from his father. Some of them are tucked away, packed in grease underground, and some militia's sitting on them in case a race war starts. Some psychopath somewhere has an apartment, a trailer, a house, a metal storage container full of weapons that they're assembling with ammunition, planning to hurt people. Somewhere out there right now that exists. And it's fucking sad, but it's true, right? So the reason I support the Second Amendment is because if you made guns illegal tomorrow, people know how to make them. There would immediately, across machine shops all over America, after hours, people would be in there making guns. People would be buying lathes and all the equipment that's needed. You could try to control gunpowder. People would start making gunpowder from scratch. I guarantee it. There would then be a black market in gunpowder and bullets and ammunition. People would make guns. Then what are you going to do? Restrict the types of metals that people can have so that they can't make a gun out of it? I mean, that's where are you going to draw the line? You can't you can't uncreate 237 million guns. They're not going to go away. And if you tried to go door to door to collect them all, you would have a civil war on your hands. And you know that the people who are fervent Second Amendment supporters are not going to volunteer their guns, bring them to the city square, throw them in a pile, and then have them all melted down to make baby strollers out of them or something. I don't know. So guns are here. They're part of our culture. We have to deal with that. I don't even want to talk about political solutions. That's not what this is about. Now that I've said all that, and I don't have any notes on this. The only notes that I had were just some of the basic statistics, but all this, I've been thinking about this all afternoon. I knew what I was going to say when I knew I was going to talk about this. And since I've said all that, and that's just my personal experience with guns, and the context in which I see guns, which is extremely complicated. It's extremely complex. And there are no easy solutions. And there are no easy answers, and I wouldn't even pretend to have a solution. I don't do left and right politics on this show. So to kind of get into the legal end of this and what solutions may or may not be appropriate, that's another topic for another show, not this one. Here's the bottom line. You know what was going on at Walmart today in El Paso, Texas? There were parents there with kids buying school supplies. So there were a lot of kids there. Of course, it's the weekend. There's no school. There would be a higher number of kids there on a weekend day normally anyway, but you know what it's like in these department stores when it's time to go back to school and the kids need clothes and pencils and notebooks and slide rulers. So Walmart was full of families today, kids, parents, kids looking to go back to school. And we know that there are some children that are victims. Once again, there's no breakdown. There are 20 people dead right now that when they woke up this morning had plans for dinner tonight. They had a plan for what was going to happen tomorrow on Sunday. They thought they knew what was going to happen on Monday. 24 plus people who are injured. Many of them now probably have life-altering injuries that will take months, maybe even years, to recover from. Maybe some of those people will succumb to their injuries, and unfortunately, the number of dead will increase. Some people may be disabled for the rest of their lives. At least 24 people. At least 20 people dead. All of those people thought they knew what was going to be going on tonight in their lives, and they're gone. They never even saw their homes again from being in Walmart or being in the parking lot. All because, once again, some fucking nutcase with a gun wants to commit cultural suicide, literal and metaphorical, and kill a bunch of people in some kind of fucking expression of anger that the rest of us can't really comprehend because we don't really think that way. And that's the bottom line. I don't mean to be a drag. I don't mean for this to be a downer. But with me thinking about this all afternoon, I could not even think about talking about anything else but that. And I'm not going to do this every time a mass shooting happens. There's going to be another one that's going to roll around. It may be worse. It may not be as worse. It may not be as bad in terms of numbers of casualties, but every one of them is a tragedy, whether it's one person or 53 or 54 or 55. But we need to think about the American identity and what our relationship is going to be like with guns. Can we overcome a seed of selfishness? Can we compromise that libertarian value of thinking that we're entitled to have a gun to benefit the greater good? Or are we always going to be split as a culture between people who are willing to give and compromise and people who are dead set in their ways and completely unwilling to compromise? And that's without even really getting into left-right politics. That's just about, I don't know, placing one's own needs and desires over the overall benefit to society as a whole. So it's something to think about. It's Saturday, August 3rd, 2019. There are 20 people who thought they were going to be having dinner tonight. At least 24 people who had no idea they'd be in the hospital at this time tonight. Kids going back to school. I don't know, America. What the fuck are we going to do with ourselves? I think it's time to call ourselves out. Anyway, there can be no happy music tonight. Be totally inappropriate. Think about those 20 people. Think about those 24 plus people. Think about all their friends, families, their community, El Paso, America, the world, all of our fellow human beings. Next Friday, Mo Kelly from KFI 640 AM. Next Saturday night, 1 week from tonight, Dr. Irina Scott. Thank you for watching, everyone. Hug the people that you love. Smile at strangers. Be nice. Let the other person go first in the car. Let someone else cut in front of you at Starbucks. Give the people you love a hug. And don't get discouraged. Think about solutions. That's the best possible thing we can do. Thank you for watching. Be safe this week. We'll see you next weekend. Thank you for watching Mysterious Forces Live. Good night, everybody.